Superman, Last Son of Krypton by Elliot S. Magen. Chapter 9. Oric. Toby's audience was nearly as heterogeneous as the planet itself, as heterogeneous as his own ancestry. It was the crowd coming out of the temple. The chief speaker of the temple was terribly impressed with Toby's talent. He was continually after the minstrel to chant the verses of Sanaben's prophecies at the services. After a while, Toby finally agreed that his singing at the temple entrance would consist of the verses, along with Toby's own introductions and translations. 1 day of every 10, according to law, had to include attendance at one temple service. That law included anyone who spent more than 6 consecutive days on Oric. But it did not include Toby. Toby was insane. Among those lingering a moment after the service to listen to Toby were an arachnid from Polaris, a tripedal from the Septus group, even a humanoid all the way from the Central Cluster somewhere. They certainly came a long way these days to get a piece of the action. There must have been 60 or more listeners and no more than 2 of the same race. And they all, very likely, thought Toby was a fool, a mad poet, a singer of silly songs, a diversion from the serious work of slicing up chunks of the galactic arm and selling them to the highest bidder. These petty usurers and money changers might think more of Toby if they stopped to notice what he was singing. It was old when the Guardians had mothers, and Arcturus only glowed in God's eye, when dominion of the spaceways was another's, when angels were the only souls to fly. The prophecy of Sanaben was tendered, bid by him who did fold the spiral's tips, for us whom his handiwork has rendered, to guide us by words of prophets' lips. When the minions of immortal spread galactic, when 1,000 cultures dwell in Vega's glow, when a sailing ship of starflight is the tactic, when these things all come to pass, then we will know that a hybrid born on Vega has been spreading massive strength through an empire built on trade, a path to an arms rule he is treading. 'Gainst his rule, need for freedom sure will fade. But the heathens would not notice the message, only the medium. They would toss trinkets or treasures into the minstrel's basket, according to their station and wealth. This was not payment, actually, but gifts, and they would go back to work. One of the listeners was listening. The little gray humanoid from the Central Cluster dropped his gift into the minstrel's basket, a modest chip of rare granite, and waited for the rest of the crowd to disperse. This planet, Oric, was becoming the economic center for this sector of the galaxy. The world was significantly larger than Earth, but made of lighter material. Its gravity was consequently slightly less strong. No one quite remembered what intelligent race, if any, was native to Oric. The Guardians kept records of such things, but no one else was sufficiently concerned to find out. 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, by Earth measure of time, which is of dubious value among hundreds of intelligent races whose lifespans vary from about 12 years to near mortality, Oric first became a hub of the expanding slave trade in the galactic arm. The arm was that sector of the galaxy that swung out at the outer tip of the spiral of stars that was the Milky Way. It included all the stars visible to the naked humanoid eye from Earth, as well as a few more. It was the last sector to approach the state of civilization. There was a right and a wrong in the universe, and that distinction was not very difficult to make. Slavery, of course, was wrong. This was not to say that there were not certain races or certain individuals among races who were best suited to serve the needs of others. The concepts of right and wrong in the universe, however, were closely tied with the concept of consistency. Servitude as a commercial commodity is inconsistent, a contradiction in terms. In practice of buying and selling, or giving and getting, as it was looked at on Oric, a certain freedom of choice is implied on the part of the parties in to the transaction. Mandatory servitude does not fit in with that scheme. No one but scholars in the ethics of Sonnabend ever went through the thought process when wondering what was right and wrong. Most beings simply knew. The rules were there, had been since Sonnabend laid them down 8 billion years ago. The power of the great prophet was such that most of his principles, in some form, found their way into nearly every developed or developing culture in the galaxy. The principles were not always followed, but they did in fact determine very clearly the difference between right and wrong. Loosely translated into English, some of Sonnabend's ethical standards could be stated like this. Do not bear false witness against your neighbor. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No one had any reliable memory of Sonnabend himself. There was no reliable record left of his exact origins. Although there were legends, he so transformed the galaxy that there was no longer any concept of what the galaxy was like before him, even among the few who were alive then. That was probably just as well. It was the voice of the prophet that inspired the founding of the Guardians, a collection of 9 immortal humanoid males whose purpose was to keep order in the galaxy. That purpose brought them to Auric and the Galactic Arm. The Arm was the last sector of the galaxy in which the Immortals extended their active interest. It was always in their power to come here. There was simply never anything going on here before that demanded their attention. Only wanderers, rogue stars, were outside their jurisdiction. The Guardians were also inveterate record keepers. Over 8 billion years they recorded the births and deaths of stars, as well as the fleeting histories of various forms of life on worlds spinning around those stars. When the star sun Vega was born, they watched. When the profusion of black holes provided intelligent beings with power for traveling beyond the speed of light, they watched. When Krypton died, they watched and they waited. The little gray humanoid hovered in a corner, impassively watching the mulligan stew of bodies zoom this way and that. The minstrel's audience was dispersing, and the grinning, mustachioed, four-armed elf hopped in front of the humanoid. This was Toby, the mad minstrel. "You're a Malthusian, aren't you, man? Of anthropology, I'm a fan." The grinning leprechaun sounded preposterous in any language. The remarkable international translators everywhere on Auric wore around their necks like amulets that coded the intent of any speaker into the language of the listener. And since Toby talked in the Orgresian equivalent of what in English is the enticing technique called rhyming, so was it translated into whatever was the humanoid's native language. The minstrel was always on stage, often jabbering and nonsensical, but always rhythmic. "I am a native of Malthus," said the impassive face. "You are adept at distinguishing the origins of beings of similar races?" "A ball with a backbone of 15 degrees, a small ball and socket joint down in your knees, both made my conclusion one of great ease." Toby was sounding too intelligent, he thought. It would be a good idea to allay the stranger's suspicion before they had a chance to form. As he spoke, he absently caused his instrument, a device capable of making cloudy images from light as well as musical sounds, to form the image of a surface with a round hole. Over the next several minutes, an imagined creature of Toby's own design seemed to try from every conceivable angle to slide his square body into the round hole. The forms Toby spun were of directed light, not subjected to gravitational force, but apparently infinite mass. They could not be moved or dispersed except by the command of one adept at playing Toby's instrument. It was simple for the minstrel to feign madness. All he needed to do was appear to open his mind to those around him. "You've travelled from Galaxy Center to here. What brings you to Auric, a distance not near?" "A rumor I am stopping off on a journey to a star on the rim, a dwarf called Sol. Have you heard of it? I have been there myself, seen remarkable things like a giant world girdled by colorful rings. That would be Sol 6. The reason that area is often called the System of the Rings. You are that widely traveled within the galactic arm? From Spiral's tip to the shores of sight, I've roared the interstellar night. So tell me, sir, this rumor queer that speeds your journey on to there. I go to the world Sol 3, called Terra by the beings who inhabit it. World of chaos, without plan, and legendary Superman! Yes, the refugee from the destroyed world that orbited Antares. Quite an underachiever, wouldn't you say? You've dodged the question, changed our course. Can Sol 3 hide some great resource? The gray being allowed his first faint smile. Toby could charm the thumbs off a humanoid. What harm could possibly come of telling one like you? There was a brilliant Terran who died recently, and it is said that he left a final mathematical discovery in a secret hideaway designed to open a generation after his death. A generation of Terrans have since passed. Terrans contend with rocks and sticks, with fossil fuels, they're in a fix. How could one of brilliant mind be one of those most wretched kind? You have indeed been there, I see. The discoverer was named Einstein, and he was in touch with the spirit of Sonnabend. I have heard that he left the secret of trisecting an angle. This is an amazing discovery, then? I fear its importance is past my ken. I trusted it would be, poet. For a bit more than 1,000,000 years, the Guardians had been experimenting with a standing corps of agents who acted as a sort of galactic police force. The Green Lantern Corps consisted of one mortal from each sector of the galaxy, which was mapped and divided arbitrarily into geographic regions by the Guardians. Green Lanterns were of different races, chosen for their honesty and fearlessness, and were generally romantic, swashbuckling sorts of characters. They were each equipped with uniforms, which varied with their respective physiologies, and a power battery, whose raw energy could be focused through a charm that each carried at all times. Humanoid Green Lanterns wore their charm as a ring. A Green Lantern was finally appointed to patrol the sector of the galactic arm less than 4,000 years ago in response to the atrocities perpetuated by the slave trade on Auric. This first Green Lantern of the arm was a humanoid from the planet that orbited Antares, called Krypton. Not only did he manage to eliminate the slave trade, but he brought the first copies of Sonnabend's Chronicles to the arm and saw to it that a fundamentalist temple was established on Auric. Like the greatest of leaders, this Kryptonian Green Lantern joined symbol with substance. The podium for the chief speaker of the temple was built out of the auction block from which slaves were sold on that spot. The presence of the temple brought about a following of the prophet Sonnabend. That was quite fantastical. Consequently, society on Auric was among the most ritualized in the galaxy, especially for a society so scrambled with exotic races. It would be necessary, the Guardians knew, for these people to pay a possible undue lip service to the letter of the ethics until they truly understood the spirit. The immortal Guardians were a manipulative breed, and age brought with it subtlety. It was probably no coincidence that the Green Lantern of the sector that included most of the galactic arm was a humanoid from Superman's adoptive world. As the man from the center of the galaxy ambled into the rushing crowd on this planet of great affairs, he knew where his poet friend would be going next. The little gray humanoid didn't look an eon over 6 billion. And that is the end of chapter 9.